So everybody welcome mother, entrepreneur, and meditation guide, Malika Chopra.
Thank you. I do feel we just met a month ago, but we're going to be fast friends. Thank you for having me here at this beautiful space, and what a great crowd. So we're going to start with the meditation. Before we do the meditation, I'm going to tell you a short story. I have lots of stories and love telling stories, but Light asked me to share this one, which I shared at Wanderlust as well. So I grew up in a family where I learned how to meditate when I was 9. So that's 35 years ago. Many of you may know my father, Deepak Chopra, or read one of his books, or follow him on Twitter. So I grew up in a family where I learned how to meditate when I was 9. When we were young, my dad used to ask us questions like, who are you? What do you want? How can you serve in the world? And my brother and I, as kids, he'd ask us these questions: what do you want? And we'd say tickets to Hawaii and, an Atari game, because we're old now. And he'd listen and he'd say, okay, what about asking for love, compassion, inspiration, a sense of purpose? And so we were guided to ask for those things too. I grew up in that environment, and yet I like to share that my story is a very messy story. So I did write a book that came out a year ago. It's called Living with Intent: My Somewhat Messy Journey to Purpose, Peace, and Joy. And in there, I do share a lot of stories. I'm a very irregular meditator. I hate yoga. I'm not vegetarian. All of the assumptions that people actually make about me as a Chopra are often not true. And a few years ago, I teach meditation and I talk about health and wellness. And a few years ago, I was speaking in front of a group of people. I'm a mom with 2 kids, 14 and 11, and I'm in that crazy stage of driving my kids around and, always feeling tired and frustrated and not knowing what I'm doing by the end of the day. And so I was teaching people meditation or talking about meditation, and while I was standing on stage, in the back of my head, I was thinking, why did I have that chocolate chip cookie and double macchiato before getting on stage? I feel so hyper. I have to go get the dry cleaning and pick up the dog food, and my life is such a mess. And so to deal with the drama that I was kind of going through in my head, I told everyone to close their eyes and meditate. And I stood on stage and I thought, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? And so I embarked on a journey at 40, where I decided, you know what, I talk about intention, I have a website called Intent, and yet I'm not living with intent. And what does it mean to live with a sense of purpose? And so, because I'm fortunate, I got to talk to great teachers, beginning with my father, Deepak, who freaked out when I first told him that I'm a mess. And then I talked to people like Marianne Williamson and Eckhart Tolle and Andrew Weil. I went and spoke to the head of UNICEF, thinking maybe she has her act together because every day she serves and saves children. And when I got to her office, she was a mess because she was leaving for Rwanda, but her son had forgot his homework at home, and so she was coordinating that. So I realized in that process that we're all on a messy journey. So my story that I'm going to share before we get into the meditation is my visit to Eckhart Tolle. He is the author of The Power of Now. Oprah is a big fan of his, and some of you may be familiar with him. And he was on the top of my list. It took me about 9 months to set up a meeting to go talk to him. And I'd read all his books, researched questions about intention. And the morning of our meeting came. I'm here in LA, I live in Santa Monica. He lives in Vancouver, but we were going to meet in San Francisco where he was speaking. So I woke up early in the morning for my 5 a.m. flight, and when I woke up, I was sneezing, my eyes were itchy, I couldn't speak, I was a complete mess. And I actually thought, my God, I shouldn't go meet this great teacher when I'm sneezing and coughing nonstop. But I decided it had taken a long time and this was an important meeting for my book. So I stuffed myself with cold medicine, got up to go to the bathroom, and I checked my phone, and there was a text message from my father. And it said, "Good luck with the interview. Remember that he is always in the now." It's like, okay. So I got ready, headed to the airport, another text message from my dad, "In the now." And I was like, okay. Got to San Francisco, headed to the hotel where we were meeting. Another text message from my dad, remember, be present, now warning me that I better do that as well. And I met Eckhart's assistant in the lobby of the hotel. Now, I had prepared for 6 to 8 months for this meeting, so I had many questions, and this was an anchor for my book. And when I met his assistant in the lobby of the hotel, he said, "It's so nice you're here. Eckhart's really looking forward to meeting you, but he only has 10 minutes." So, I speak a lot about intent, and that, intents come from our soul, goals come from our mind. But in this moment, when he told me this, I started to completely panic because my goal of kind of sitting down for this interview and traveling was obviously going to be a disaster. So, but of course, I smiled to his assistant and said, "Oh, thank you, no problem." And I started sweating, feeling like I'm going to sneeze again. And we headed to the airport. Headed to the elevator. And in the elevator, my phone buzzes again and again. It's my dad saying, "In the now." At this point, I was so irritated with my father, I shut the phone off. I was like, "Shut up." And we went, knocked on the door, and Eckhart opened the door. And I had a sense, really, of peace and lovingness and kindness. He asked me to come in. We sat down. And I told him that, I'm working on this book project. I'm really trying to understand this concept of intent and living with purpose, which, I grew up learning about. And Eckhart said, "I love the concept of intent. It is the most powerful force in the universe." And so I smiled, relieved, sat forward, waiting for him to talk more. And then he stopped. And he said, "Do you hear those bells?" So I thought, yeah, I hear some bells in the distance. And he said, "Well, when I was young, there was a church outside of where I worked, and these bells would ring, and these bells remind me of that experience." So I smiled politely, but in the back of my head, started to really panic because we had now gone through 6 of the 15 minutes that I had with Eckhart Tolle. And he sat there with a smile on his face and just listened to these bells. And 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, the bells just wouldn't stop ringing. And they rang and they rang and they rang. And I started to really panic because I said, this book's going to be a disaster. This is my anchor interview. And there was a point in that kind of craziness where I finally just took a deep breath, let go, and decided, you know what? I got to be here, be in the now, and be present with Eckhart Tolle and listen to the bells. And so together we sat, listening to the bells. And after months of feeling stressed out and frustrated and not knowing what I'm doing, I actually just was present. And I felt a sense of peace and joy and love and inspiration. And as we sat there, his assistant knocked on the door. My 15 minutes were up. I didn't really get to ask any question, and I got up to leave. And then Eckhart said, "You know what? Sit down. We have to talk." And he spent an hour and a half talking to me about intention and purpose and what it means to live with intent. And in that conversation, I shared with him that, I kind of felt like my life was falling apart and that, I was super busy between my company and my kids and driving around. And I said to him at some point, I grew up being taught that we all have a unique purpose. But I don't know what my purpose is. I'm just a soccer mom. I drive my kids around from one activity to another. And he said something to me which really resonated with me, where he said, you know, it's the everyday people who are doing extraordinary things who are raising the frequency of the planet. And so there's nothing more special that you can do than to be a soccer mom. But do it with love, do it with presence, do it with compassion, and then you will be living with a sense of purpose. So, with that, I would like to invite you all to really take a deep breath, sit comfortably, be in the now, and what I'd like to do is have you mentally repeat the words, I am. I am. So mentally, not out loud, just close your eyes and repeat the words, I am. The vibrations of I am are like Om, Amen, Aham. They represent the infinite to the finite. I am. I am. And when your attention drifts away from the sound, which it will, and which is completely normal and natural, just come back to the words, I am. And we'll just sit in silence for a few minutes, and I'll tell you what to do next. Now keep your eyes closed, and you can stop repeating the words, I am. And as you continue to breathe in and out, I want you to just pay attention to the space between the in and the out. So breathe in, pause, and breathe out. And in that pause, just pay attention to the presence that's there between your breath. In and out. In and out. Now, keeping your eyes closed, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Just be present, let go of your breath, let go of thoughts, And as I ask these questions, just experience the answers. Don't try to intellectualize them. Who am I? Who am I? What do I want? What do I want? How can I serve? How can I serve? Now shift your attention to your heart, and I want you to think about what you are grateful for today. And let that go, and let's take another deep breath in and out. And now, whenever you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. So that's a very simple meditation which involves transcendence, using the words I am to settle down, self-awareness, which is focusing on the breath, and then, questionings, asking our intents. So I talk about intentions. Intents come from our soul, not from our mind. And there's a phrase in the Upanishads, the great Indian texts, which say, you are what your deepest desire is. As is your desire, so is your intent. As is your intent, so is your deed. As is your deed, so is your destiny. So it begins with going to a quiet place, asking questions, and ultimately living with intent. Thank you.